Now it's time to get to know your team members. And I know some of you guys are like, what is she talking about? I am a one-man band. Have you guys ever heard that term, one-man band? I get it from the television industry. It refers to a reporter that basically drives to the location, finds a place to park, gets all the equipment out, shoots everything, and then they come back to the studio, they edit everything. I mean, they are doing everything. That's what a one-man band is. And some of you guys are watching this going, Sunny, I'm a one-man band. And let me tell you what. Good for you. Some of my hardest years of my life were when I worked at television stations where I was a one-man band. But you know what that did? It built character. It built stamina. But some of you may be in a situation where your podcast is part of your business, and so you may have some help. You may have people that help you with your business, perhaps an assistant or a coworker or something like that can come in and help you with this project. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the roles of people that could be part of your podcast and what those people typically do as part of your podcast, right? How does a podcast come together? You have you, right? I'm assuming if you're watching this is your podcast, but I guess you could be an assistant watching this for somebody else. But you have the person who is going to be the talent, right? I should come up with a list of definitions. Talent is the person that is either on camera or it's the host, right? It's the person that is in front of the mic, in front of the camera. That's your talent. So that's probably you, right? It's your podcast, that's probably you. You could have a co-host. There are pros and cons to having co-hosts. I have not had a co-host actually in any of my podcasts, but having a co-host can be helpful if you have someone that's committed. Anything that goes wrong that I hear with co-hosts is because one person is more committed than the other person. So if you're going to have a co-host, I suggest you choose someone wisely. You have some sort of agreement worked out because that can get a little goofy too. And really with all of these roles that we're talking about, I do recommend that you have some sort of contract. It can be something very simple, but something that you give them so you know that you own all of the rights to the show. That could be very important down the road. So you have to determine, obviously, if you're going to pay them or whatever the situation might be. But everyone needs to be kind of on the same page with that. So your co-host, it can be very helpful if they commit to the project because they can help find guests for the show if that's your format. They can help write scripts. They can take over and do, a portion of the show, depending on how you work out your format of your show. So there's less responsibility on you if you have a co-host, but it can backfire, right? What happens if that person that was originally so eager to do all this stuff with your show, what if they decide, that they don't want to do it anymore, or something happens in their life where they can't do it anymore? Then what are you going to do, right? So you do have to be careful with co-hosts. But you could have a co-host. Producer. A producer can be very, very helpful if you, as the talent, just want to focus on the presentation, basically, and perhaps creating some of the content. But a lot of the behind-the-scenes stuff, like scheduling guests, like working with the editor to make sure the editor has the files and a lot of this stuff that happens behind the scenes, that's what a producer is for. If you are doing a live recording, sometimes producers are able to hop on a recording with you and make sure that runs smoothly. Sometimes those are sound engineers, but usually that's more of a studio type of environment. Usually if you're doing some remote recording like what we're going to be talking with in a later video, then you would be using a producer. But a producer can really help. They can help write scripts. They can help take your initial thoughts and format it a little bit better. If you get somebody that really knows podcasting, it can be a lifesaver because you can come up with some initial ideas, bounce them off your producer, and your producer can give you some feedback on that. Well, I don't know if that would work out really well in podcasting. Why don't we do this instead? So they can really be your right-hand man, if you will, when it comes to content creation and just making sure everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. So that's the producer. I talked a little bit about sound engineers. I do think that's more of a studio thing, but if you just wanted someone that had more of a techie background, because producers really do, they're mainly focused on content, but a good producer understands all the roles, right? And hopefully has even had a little experience with all the roles, so they understand what everyone's responsibility is. So a sound engineer would be focused more on the tech side of stuff, really running the equipment as you're recording and making sure everything's running smoothly. Usually more of a studio role, but it is possible to have that, especially if your podcast is in studio. I'm assuming most of you guys are going to be recording remotely, but if you don't want to be responsible for going to a location and setting everything up and making sure, doing a mic test with all the mics, you may need a sound engineer. Next, an editor. Hallelujah. Editors are saving graces in the podcasting space. I'm going to tell you a quick story. I was editing my shows for years and years, and keep in mind, I do have a background in television. I know how to edit. That's not a problem, okay? But when I started podcasting, I was pretty much a one-man band. And it got to a point where I kind of went crazy with my podcast. I launched with 3 podcasts, and these are I'm not talking about episodes, like this is a whole podcast. And all of the episodes were weekly, and I ended up with five weekly podcasts. So Monday through Friday, I was releasing a brand new episode in one of these shows. And it got to a point where I was just, I was beside myself. It was just way too much work for me. But I was so scared to hand over my little baby, or babies at that point, 5 shows to somebody else. Because if, you can record whatever you want to. If the editor doesn't do a good job in the editing process, or they cut things out, or, it doesn't matter, because that's the final product. That's what your audience is hearing, is whatever the editor put out, not necessarily what you recorded. It's what the editor does. So I was very scared to hand off my babies to somebody else. And I had a friend that just said, do you know how much time that's going to free up for you? Even though you know how to do this, and you may even be able to edit better than the person you're hiring. Hopefully that's not the case. But if you're a really good editor, and I'm a great editor, if I handed that off to somebody else, are they even going to be as good as me? So all these things were kind of going through my head. It's important that you find a good editor, someone that you really jive with. But if I had to point to one thing, so for all of you one-man banders out there, if I had to point to one thing that you should outsource as quickly as possible, it would be to hire an editor. Because it makes all the difference in the world. You can literally focus on the content, focus on the things that you're really, really good at and that you really enjoy focusing on, and leave the editing to somebody else. Because even if you enjoy it in the beginning, it does get to be a little monotonous. So I know I spent a long time on the editor position, but that is just really, really crucial. And again, when you get to a point, I highly recommend that you outsource it. And the last job is just that of an assistant. And really, your assistant might also be your assistant/producer. That role can kind of be split. The difference would be, I think, a true podcast producer really has a producer mindset and what works specifically for podcasting. Assistants, as many of you already know, are helpers. So you really tell them what to do and how to do it. So if you need, people emailed and you've got the email template that needs to go out, but you don't want to manually do it, that's a great job for an assistant. And there is some stuff that needs to be done once you put your episode together when you're ready to promote it. We'll talk about this a little bit later, but you do need to reach out to your guests and give them information and ask them to do certain things. And you may not want to be bogged down with that. So if you have someone that can act as an assistant for your podcast, that can be a tremendous help. So let's review them really quickly, right? You are the star of the show. You are the talent. Congratulations. You could have a co-host. You could have a producer. You could have a sound engineer. You could have an editor, and you could have an assistant. Now, if you want to hire out, this can be tricky. And I'm laughing because you guys have probably been in this situation, right? In your own businesses, you need to hire out for something. And it can be tricky. This is hiring process. There are sites, as most of you know, that you can get freelancers for a good price. My experience is you typically get what you pay for. You do need to be careful on these sites. If you are looking to have someone that's reputable and you have a little bit of a budget here, please reach out to me. In addition to teaching people how to podcast, I also run a podcast network. It's called the Independent Podcast Network. And if you want to look for it online, it's independentpodcast.network. We have a services page on that website. And it's because so many people have come to me to say, Sunny, I'm now ready to hire an editor for my podcast. I have no idea who to choose. Who do I trust? I'm trying to make this as simple as possible for you. There are teams of people that we have worked with in the past that I have personally used, that I have personally vetted, and those are the people that we recommend. And so if that's of interest to you, again, go to the website, independentpodcast.network, search under services, and you will see the general prices. And if you're interested, then contact us and we can help you out with this.